Hello and welcome to Voices in the Dark. This is our first attempt at recording in our newly kitted out studio.
Yes, it's strange. It's strange and different. I mean, you've done an amazing job. It feels like a real studio. Now, I saw you posted the picture on Instagram or whatever. I was like, Jesus Christ, look.
Taking it up a notch.
Yeah, I'm taking it up a notch. I feel like I'm seriously underdressed now for the occasion.
I was thinking the same thing. It's like super cash and I'm sweating through it. So it's in high definition.
It's a hot summer's day and I ran a Spartan race yesterday. So I'm in pain in places I didn't even know I had places. But we're still going to talk about Seneca and Stoicism. And this week's episode it's letter 45 and it's got a terrible fucking title. On Sophistical Argumentation. Now, I did manage to get by the title and into a sense of what this is about, and I didn't sort of write a note as exactly how to sum it up, because it's one that's a bit hard to sum up, but a lot of the core of it is not being obsessed with detail at the expense of actually ever doing anything, or actually ever learning anything, or not trying to control things through setting everything up well in advance, or trying to read every book on the subject so that you're the master of it, because then you're basically already drawing your pension and you never got to control anything anyway. But it's quite fun. Seneca's pretty grumpy in it and I quite like it when he's grumpy. I feel an affinity with that.
So we get off my yard kind of
It's like, I took you one as a charge, Lucilius, but stop being such a pussy.
Yeah.
So yeah, everything's feels different. I haven't got a microphone in front of me.
It's gonna take some getting used to, I think, in terms of our approach. But it's quite nice because I feel relaxed. I feel like we're having a philosophical discussion. Like if we're sitting down to chat about Stoicism without it being recorded, I feel like we would be sitting like this.
We could
drinks
be.
Though. I forgot. We needed the Macallan and the glasses and shot, so we can get sponsored by them at some point.
I'm sure that they're desperate to sponsor us directly. Maybe. I'm just aware that as long as people can see only like the upper part of my body, they won't see that the crotch is tearing in my shorts.
No close-ups on the crotch.
But maybe that's what I should do. For those who don't yet follow me on Instagram, you can at jwaterlow. And now that my book is out in the world, I decided, given people only really respond heartily on Instagram if I'm taking my clothes off, I would have pictures of me naked except being covered by books. And it's gone down well so far. I don't know how many book sales it will generate. I'll check back with you on that one, but maybe I could at least...
do marketing campaigns based on that.
Well, my big idea is that for each book sold, we'll remove a book from the picture until the person who buys the final book will get the unedited, full nude.
Okay, that's pretty good.
So yeah, I put that together as a marketing plan, which is brilliant, if I say so myself. Would you care to do our housekeeping announcements?
Yes. Please come visit us on our website, voicesinthedark.world, and follow us on all the social medias at V in the D, mostly V in the D.
Yeah.
Except Instagram, vinthed.pod.
Yes.
And if you like what we do and you want to support us, we're also on Patreon, which is a Kickstarter-like platform, but for ongoing support. Think of it like a pay-as-you-want Netflix for all the things that you're really passionate about. There's probably any artist that you're fond of probably has a Patreon page, and you can support them by pledging like $1 a month. Or if you are feeling a little bit more friendly towards us, the worth of a pint per month, I think, is a pretty reasonable amount.
It would be nice, we could even send pictures of us having the pints to you.
Yes. Yes, I think depending on what the pledge is, we will show the picture of us enjoying that amount.
Yes, and we'll totally forget about the cost of hosting and equipment and my travel to and from Edinburgh on a regular basis.
So, if you send us a pint's worth per month, we'll send an Instagram of us having a pint. If you send us blackjack and hookers money, we'll send you a picture of that.
Yeah, you'll send a picture of me looking happy on a train in first class. So any which way, thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. We're getting increasing numbers of people just writing and saying that show really helped me out, especially the sex and relationships one, which is always a really nice experience, I gotta say, because I'm personally feeling pretty exhausted with a lot of things I'm doing in my life, and upcoming, I will soon be needing to find another source of revenue for my existence.
Yeah, your gig is at an end.
Yeah, my paid gig is at an end. I have to finish the work for it, which is freaking me out in and of itself. And on the other side of that is the abyss. So it is nice at least to hear from people that all of the, I don't know, it's more than hours, the cumulative many months, I think, of time that have gone into the podcast, or at least helping some people in some ways, whether it's just entertaining them or maybe like giving them a little mirror in which to be able to see themselves from a new angle. So really appreciate you getting in touch, guys. Thank you. Now reviewers on iTunes, you fucks. And all that kind of thing. Let's talk about Seneca. So Lucilius has been complaining that he doesn't have enough books or like learning resources, and Seneca says, shut the fuck up. Or more specifically, he says, you complain that in your part of the world there is a scant supply of books, but it is quality rather than quantity that matters. A limited list of reading benefits. A varied assortment serves only for delight. He who would arrive at the appointed end must follow a single road and not wander through many ways. What you suggest is not travelling, it is mere tramping.
Well, feeling for Lucilius, I kind of imagine that he's like in the wild, wild west equivalent of Rome by being in Sicily. Like there's nothing there, no one to fuck, nothing to read.
There are no sheep even.
And he's like, just send me anything, Donald Duck comics or, porn, anything will do.
Seneca's like, no, get your shit together. I think, so I had just a random conversation with a friend a while ago, but it really stuck with me that we were talking about, like, if you try and write a piece on something, or you try to finish a project, or whatever it is, strangely, the books that are actually on your shelf will work for you. Maybe not if they're like on 100% totally a different thing to what you're doing, but mostly it's not that you need the book or the one that's going to really be the brilliant source of material you need. If you're already kind of deep into a topic and you're thinking on it, it's as though whatever it is you read will somehow bounce back some kind of insight. The same way it's like what happens in the movies and TV, that you've got the main character and he's trying to solve some puzzle or mystery, and someone says, would you like brown or white sugar? And they're like, that's it. And they suddenly crack the case, because the mind is in this place of questioning and it just needs a few more surfaces to reflect back on itself. And so you don't need to have the complete library to be able to draw the kind of things or prompt the kind of thoughts so that you could do the thing that you want to do. And I think that's kind of what Seneca's getting at.
Yeah, and it's a trap I think a lot of people get caught up these days. This whole like, if I only read the right book or have the right self-help guru or watch the right YouTube video, then I'll be successful. And people like Tai Lopez encourage it massively. This whole, this is my knowledge, kind of like my library.
There's a secret recipe and it's only one recipe.
Yeah.
I mean, which makes no sense at all, because this is probably a shit analogy, but just if you want some cola in your life, there are many cola options. There's not only one magic one. And if you don't, maybe you have a Sprite, and that's also nice.
And I was thinking that most of my proper long-term learning is when I actually put things into practice.
Mm-hmm.
Reading gives me a base, then is, but when it comes time to actually put anything into practice, you pretty much get spanked until, like by reality, until you actually fiddle, attempt, try again. So this idea of, like, I think he mentions it, the idea of preparing for life and not actually living it is just, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
It's like reading all the books on sex and never actually having any. because you're scared to do it, or you want to be the master at sex before you even begin. And then the actual experience, if you ever get around to it, you're going to be so laden with all of the detail, complexity in this technique or that technique, you're going to remember to have any fun. And if you're just or it's all up in your head trying to do all of this. I don't think that that's going to help the other person or people if you just really went for it and you finally got, if that's really going to help. You know, they're going to detect that weirdness.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the next point that Seneca gets onto, not about gangbangs, but we can maybe try and continue that theme. But before that, there was one other thing I made a note of, that, yeah, this sort of obsession over trying to read every damn book in the library, or that before you can do anything, you must read all 200 volumes of the long history of this particular school of thought or industry or whatever. No, not true. You'll drown in the middle of that. And as Seneca says, that's not really traveling through the knowledge. You're just sort of wading through it, going, I must digest all of this stuff. That's why a lot of German history books are extremely boring. Not because I sit and read German history books, but when I looked at some and friends who work with them, it's like they're almost encyclopedias, and they're even written out, not all, but this is just sort of the nature of German academia in the history world. Like section 4.2.3.1, like for real. And it's as though there's no opinion coming through, or it's very delicately, maybe at the end, perhaps I've got something to say, but first I just want to essentially do a Xerox copy of the entire archive. Like, well, if I wanted that, could you just have sent me the pictures? I didn't want a book. Yeah. Like, just screw that. So Lucilius even asks Seneca to send some more writings of Seneca's own. And Seneca's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe not, mate. Says, your desire, however, that I should dispatch to you my own writings does not make me think myself learned, any more than a request for my picture would flatter my beauty. Quite like that idea. I know that it is due to your charity rather than to your judgment, and even if it is the result of judgment, it was charity that forced the judgment upon you. But whatever the quality of my works may be, read them as if I were still seeking, and were not aware of the truth, and were seeking it obstinately too. So Seneca's essentially saying, like, don't ask for these works of mine under the impression that I am the master. Beautifully captured sneeze. Multiple cameras and he's saying, look, I'm suspicious, Lucilius, that what you're asking for is essentially you just want to parrot what I already think, and that's not really cool. Like, that's not what I want. That's not learning. That's just becoming a puppet. And that's not what Seneca wants to happen here. And he goes on to mention he doesn't want to... Seneca says there is no one that he's enslaved himself to as like a master, where he goes, okay, this is the one. This is the guru. And I just believe all of those. It's an interesting analogy,
because I feel a lot of the people that we end up talking to that have experienced the online marketing circuit of even good people, like, you know, I mean... ranging from anyone, like who's the I'm Not Your Guru?
Tony
Robbins, but our friend Peter Sage. A lot of the people that sort of follow online gurus of any kind are getting caught up in not so much in what they're learning from it, but it's almost an addiction that they become sort of enslaved to the guru personality, as opposed to learning from the person.
It's kind of like going into the relationship just because you feel good in the presence of the other person, and you're not bringing anything to the table, and you're not making an effort. You're just like, oh, when they talk, I feel good. It's nice to have that ingredient in the mix, but, you know, if you were going to, like I don't know, kickboxing trainer or something, and you hang out with them, and you enjoy being around them, and you think they're an amazing master at what they do, but you're not even really trying to do anything other than please them, not develop yourself, not find out how things make sense for you, but you're just like, oh, they're so good, I hope I can touch them. It's a strange sort of dynamic where it's more about the personality and sucking up than it is to doing the thing which brought you to the table in the first place. And this, of course, brings me directly to Jordan Peterson fanatics. That there's a big problem, and I don't blame Jordan Peterson for this. I'm feeling a bit more well disposed to Jordan Peterson after I heard a really good interview with him on the Aubrey Marcus podcast, and I was like, oh, yeah, you know, I like a lot of things that Jordan Peterson says, and I also like it when he's in an interview scenario which isn't just combat, and you can hear him kind of be funny, And the big meme that goes around is that all of Jordan Peterson could be summed up by, go clean your room. You'll feel better if you clean your room. And then he laughs and he's like, of all the stupid things, to get big or go viral, I wish it had been something else that I had written instead of just clean your room. But that being said, if you do kind of put your things in order in some way, or like declutter the cabinet that every time you're in the room, the bathroom cabinet, and you're like, I should have cleaned that. And you clean it and you go in the bathroom and you're like, I like the bathroom more. I feel a bit better in the bathroom. Like, it's a real thing.
But I see the inverse relationship for me.
Mm-hmm.
So when I clean things when I'm down or not doing well, like when I try to, it doesn't make me feel better. It makes me feel worse.
Why?
But I don't know. Just like at the end, it's like, oh, now my room's clean, but I still feel as shit as before, and I've wasted all this effort. Like it's not psychologically helpful at all. Nor do I become happy subsequently when I enter a clean room. But when I'm happy, I clean my room.
Oh, okay.
Like I have the inverse relationship between those two things. It's more of a.
So what I need to do is I come in your house. I just like, let me check the state of his room. Oh no.
Essentially, yep. You can see how much my mind is unraveling by how long I've left my laundry on.
So
the
you
floor.
don't feel that it feeds one into the other then, because
no, not for me.
I think it does for me, but like there's a level of disorder that I'm fine with, but I do find that if I walk into my room and it's like a tip because there's all like boxes and things I haven't put away and stuff, it can hit me, go like, look, you're such a loser. You're not even got your own space in order. You're living in dirt.
See, I just start to, when things get stressful, well, part of the reason why it gets so messy is because everything else starts to zone out. Like I get blinders on, and so I'm perfectly capable of ignoring it as well. Not only am I not doing it, but I'm not even seeing it. However, if I make attempts to keep it tidy, thinking that it might help, what I've noticed is I become incredibly aware of the Sisyphean nature of it. Of the constant repeat of it, the meaningless of it all, of the fact that you can do it today and tomorrow it's a tip again. And that just makes me more depressed.
Do you feel the same way about eating?
When I'm anxious or depressed, yes.
You're like, it's not even, why should I bother eating?
I did it yesterday, yeah.
You didn't eat yesterday?
No, like, why should I bother eating now? I already did it yesterday. Like, I did it this morning. Oh my God, why is this happening again? Like, everything becomes like a torture. Everything that is repeatable becomes a torture.
Oh my God. Do you want me to just like put a bullet in your head? Because that might be the only solution.
I think so.
I think with the room tidying or whatever, so I found that it allows me to feel some sense of control or just a little achievement unlocked thing. Just a few weeks ago, I just was not in a great space at all mentally, and I just started manically cleaning stuff and just hoovering and taking out all the recycling and the trash and so on, and cleaning, polishing the furniture and stuff. And at the end of that, I was like, okay, well, none of the stuff that was stressing me out has changed, but I just have a nice level of satisfaction that I did something simple that has a clear outcome. The room was not clean. It is clean now. I like that. I used to get that sort of satisfaction working in bookshops too, that it's not like it changed anything about my life, but there are books that need to be shelved. I have shelved them. Good. Good. And there's just a simplicity to that I like, that I think is quite, it sounds maybe silly, but it's this sort of underlying aspect of life.
I guess maybe if the stress or anxiety is coming from feeling like there's no order or chaos to everything else that you're doing, having an activity which seems to have a clear beginning and an end and there's a purpose to it would bring you back. It helps establish some form of control and order. Whereas if you get stressed and anxious from the overpresence of constancy and order, adding more to that isn't.
I would have thought as an
particularly
autiste
useful.
you would love that.
I don't know. I guess it's an odd situation where I feel like I'm most unhappy when I feel like every day is the same and there's never going to be any movement, nor will there ever be.
maybe you need to go to some museums, go and have some nice activities, because there's something about being in the same place each day. Like for people who work from home, people who don't work from home, you're like, it'd be so great to work from home. But if you do it for a while and you forget to go and do other stuff, it can become a bit crushing. It's like there is just this bubble that you're in, and then it's like such a faff and a hassle to go out. But so I kind of forced myself in the past week to go, and I've been putting it off, like meet up with some old friends, or just like go and see. I bought tickets to see one of my favorite bands, Idlewild, but I was so like tired and fed up. I was like, I can't be back. And I was like, no, I'm going to the gig. It's round the corner. It's like 3 minutes walk away. And I went, and it was fantastic, because they put on a great show, but also it was just like, pull self out of this bubble. It always feels like time is so precious, or can feel like time is so precious. Like, no, I need to focus every last minute on the work that is scaring the shit out of me right now. But it's the opposite effect, the same way that if you feel like I don't have time to meditate. Well, if you do meditate, you feel you have more time. And the same kind of like go to the gym or do something physical. I feel overwhelmed. You change your physical state, your experience of the mental state changes too. Yeah. Because time, I feel I'm going off on all sorts of tangents here, but I'm not going to stop.
That's what the podcast before, no?
Something really bugged me when somebody said, I think it was Aubrey Marcus was saying, when some other people do, they talk about time is the only resource, the most precious resource. That's the thing. If you want to be a top performing CEO, whatever, time is the key resource. And I just thought, bullshit. Time is subjective. It's not some objective measure that you can put on your spreadsheet and simply cut up into pieces. Time is experienced subjectively, so the quality of what that time is what's more important if we're balancing these things on the sheet. So
total output.
I fucking reject that premise, and I think that I think Tim Ferriss and others are kind of on board with this about this obsessive need to like guard their time. Sure, if there's a lot of things you have to do, that's true, but trying to put it down like it's an objective measure means that you cheat yourself and delude yourself, but you cheat yourself of these positive experiences. I could have not gone to that gig and just sort of rested at home vegetating in front of the TV or continuing to try and work but kind of running low. Instead, I went and saw live music and I felt re-energized and much better about a lot of things, which has a nice knock-on effect of being able to grapple with the work stuff that was stressing me in the first place.
Well done.
Yeah.
Good.
Now if I wind myself back through some of those tangents, Jordan Peterson fanatics. That's where we started.
Odd people.
And it's not, like I said, it's not that I feel it's Jordan Peterson's fault. I think it is...
Well, some of it is.
Well, he has some sense of like responsibility, but he can't control how people react and put him on a pedestal, and it must be quite exciting to feel that people are listening to you. But he can't... And maybe he could take more time to go, look, don't just listen to me, go and look at these other options. But aside from doing that, it's not really in his control to be able to say, okay, it's good you're listening to me. Could you not think that you keep your mind open and questioning? And instead, I just find it very strange when I speak to people about Peterson, and if they really like him, they find it very difficult to hear anything critical about him.
Yeah, well, he is becoming like a figurehead for a movement accidentally that he doesn't necessarily want to be part of. Although there are overlaps between his views and some of the views of the crazy people.
Yeah, but I just hope he doesn't like casually talk about invading Poland, because I think people will go and do it.
But he doesn't seem to see the link between... And perhaps he doesn't realize some of the underlying misogynism of his views, or the weird sort of quasi-religious aspect and weird non-factual sort of obsession of morality is derived from Christianity.
Well, he doesn't say it that way. That's how it seems to come out and be interpreted by some people, but it's more he thinks that morality is a thing that's important, and we can see that it's played out throughout human history in the stories that we tell, that help ground ourselves in a world that makes sense to us. And he thinks because such things are best summed up in the Bible as like ancient crystallizations of these fundamental human dynamics, let's keep looking at the Bible, and the existence of those things there proves the kind of morality he's talking about.
Yes, and it would take way longer than one podcast to dissect why the way he explains it is just nonsense. But it's funny, it attracts a certain kind of... his arguments attract a certain kind of person for some reason.
A Lucilius kind of person, probably, if he didn't do well, because it sounds like a moment, and I very much empathize with this, of being wanting to go like, look, I really, please just give me the book that will explain to me what living a good life is, or that's going to set my mind at rest. And it's like the teacher, you imagine that the teacher is just refusing to give you the book. And having been in the teaching position, I have refused to give... I've found a really good book that's enabled me to be like teaching a subject I don't really know. And I was like, oh, this book's awesome. It gives such global perspective. I'm not going to tell them it exists. I'm just going to keep reading it myself. Yeah, bad teacher. I don't think it's true. It would have really helped them though, because it's this weird... It's a sort of a weird thing where at the point of teaching, even if you feel very underprepared, and this is a theme in this letter too, you've learned more than you realize. The point is, as you learn more, you realize the scope of your ignorance. So you don't feel as secure as when you knew a little. And so I did have more skills at being able to like take that cool book and go, wow, this really helps me in all sorts of ways. But I don't think that the students I was teaching on that particular class, they would have just read it and not really realized the scope and possibility of it,
right.
What was in there. That's what I tell myself.
Good thing.
So Seneca's saying, always be a student. If you think someone is a master and always right, you're doing a disservice to yourself and to them, I think. Because if you've got a decent teacher and a true master, they do realize how little they know themselves. This is how learning works, that you get better, but as you climb higher on the mountain, you realize ever more how insignificant you are. And you see the wider landscape of the things that you just don't know and can't see. The known unknowns. And that's how learning works. And if your teacher is not just a hyper insecure person, they want you to learn more as well and bring something new to the table. I mean, unless you're a total fucking narcissist, imagine the situation where you just sit and your student's there and you're like, oh yeah, I think this. And they're just like, I think that too. Like, okay. Anything else you'd like to add? Oh, I loved what you said. I loved what you said about Plato the other day. It was just so good. It was just so good. Yeah. What did it make you think of anything else? No. No, just how big your dick is.
Well, I think we find mirrors like that terrifying. And it's not just because they're a reflection of us that we don't like, which happens sometimes when you meet someone that does things that are you, but exaggerated in a way that you don't like. But that's more of a feedback loop of consciousness. Like how, I think therefore I am, which was not Voltaire, Descartes.
No. Yep.
Which I got wrong last time, and I knew that I keep beating myself. It wakes me up at night.
In your dirty room.
Yeah, in my dirty room. It's only part of the answer, because you can kind of come to a realization of self-awareness because of sort of recursive and regressive sort of analysis, and think, well, the only thing I can know is that I'm thinking about this. That's the only thing I can hold to be true. Mm-hmm. But you start to doubt that when everything else in reality feels like an echo, like a feedback, like a microphone getting too close to a speaker. You also require other people to have the semblance of also being alive and aware, to not have a weird existential freak out, I think.
I think that's true for most people. I think for the true egotist, it's more like, this is right. This is absolutely how it should be.
But I think it leads to cognitive decline. If you're surrounded by that, your mind deteriorates. You require outside input, just like we talked about the 0 point and sort of feedback and of positive and negative to all sort of sensory inputs, and how, you know, things like ice cold baths are good for you because why? Because they bring the cold sort of sensing input so low that then when it swings back, you know, your body readjusts correctly. In the absence of actual input from the outside, when the only, in this case, it's cognitive input, feedback for your mind to adjust, learn, change. When all it is a feedback loop of your own mind back to you, your mind cannot recalibrate. Like, you lose grip on reality. And I think it is a true sort of breakdown of actual consciousness when you're surrounded by basically repetition.
Yes, men. And women, not letting women off the hook here. So what does Seneca think that he needs to do instead? Let me see, what the hell does he say? I give much credit to the judgment of great men, but I claim something else, something also for my own. For these men too have left to us not positive discoveries, but problems whose solution is still to be sought. So thinking someone's got all the answers is wrong for the reasons we just suggested. You're kind of abdicating any thought of your own and possibility for growth. But also one of the main things that people leave behind when they leave a treatise on something or make a new album, whatever it may be, is that it also brings up some problems or some challenges of things where you're like, well, that didn't quite work, or that bit doesn't make sense. And this made me think of when I first started studying Russian and Soviet history, there were a couple of historians whose work just really switched me on to. I was like, this is amazing. I'm so excited by what you guys are talking about. Not just kind of reporting this political act and that political act, but really trying to get at how people were experiencing this ridiculously dramatic time of upheaval, and suggesting that, wait, were they, did they manage to play the system a little bit? And how much did they believe what they were saying when they were acting like a good Soviet citizen? What does that mean? And it sort of brought to life these lower grassroots kind of level experiences. And I was like, okay, this is cool. What is the subjective and psychological experience of this? I think without realizing, I've probably just been wanting to do psychology all along. I just happened to come through this particular route. And first of all, I was like, oh, these guys are awesome. Then it was like, wait, I don't agree with these bits. And then go on the typical kind of rebellious crusade where it's just like, okay, all these bits are wrong. So when I talk about these guys, I'm just going to be like, stupid, that's stupid, that's stupid. And it's exciting to see that the things that you see as mistakes or things that don't convince you, and be like, I've got something to say about that. And if you're in whatever system you're in, educational or workplace, it can be quite cool to play the enfant terrible and just be like, I'm calling bullshit on that, and say, I don't like that, that doesn't make sense, so I've got something better. And then I think the next phase, a good phase, and hopefully you can skip to this phase more quickly over time, is to go, okay, they did their thing, and that was really good for me to come across. And now, through thinking about it and disagreeing and learning, I've got something to offer. I think maybe this. Yeah. And so when I came to the actually writing the book version rather than all that I wrote that came before it, the tone had really shifted, and I'm really quite proud of it now to be able to say, these people gave me these ideas, and that was exciting. What they didn't talk about, though, was these issues, and I'm going to talk about them. So it's just kind of this more elegant sort of, they did this, and these are the spaces. Like Seneca's saying, there are like negative spaces here, and okay, and here's what I can contribute. Here's what I think. Rather than my previous kind of model, which was like, look at these assholes. Look at this stupid stuff they didn't do. What a bunch of fools. Let me tell you. Because it feels cool to be able to say that, I suppose, and just play that role a little bit. But it doesn't really come off well. It's a very sort of teenage rebellion, kind of trying to jump up and down and get attention, I think.
So no, it's very interesting. And I think the crucial thing to sort of take from other people, rather than facsimile copy them, which is what a lot of people do. It's like, oh, I'll learn everything that's been taught before, and then I'll be able to create something interesting, which is what Lucilius seems to be keen on and what Seneca's warning him against. It's more of your approach, where you're basically taking a piece that existed before as a seed for something else. And it just reminds me of sort of other systems in nature like that, like fractals. Like a fractal will create sort of more stuff out of it. Like one fractal equation can create all sorts of things that originated from that point but are different. Or another example that I thought was quite interesting that it reminded me of was how I remember in Italy they had some trouble with a particular beach that lost all its sand. And that was because of how they built up some town further down the coast in a way that changed the currents, you know? And vice versa. To fix it, what they did was
destroyed the town.
Just blast it. No, but rather than putting more sand, like filling it with sand, which is what a lot of people's approach to knowledge is, let me fill my beach with sand, is they created a change somewhere that created the shift in current necessary for sand to accumulate. And what you want to do is seed your mind, not fill it.
Yeah. And also, if you want to try and put seeds in anyone else's mind, then it also can't just be like, let me dump this shit on you. And another part of what I wrote about in the book was I didn't think that people telling jokes, political, critical jokes under Stalin should be understood only as some act of resistance, because it didn't really change or overthrow the regime in any measurable way. But my first attempt was to essentially say, it's not resistance. It didn't change anything. It's not a thing. And what's passive resistance? Like, I can say I'm passively resisting anything, but if I don't really take any measurable different action, nothing happens. So that was the first kind of attempt. And then the way it panned out was to go, okay, it can certainly look like resistance and feel like resistance, but that's not the whole story by a long shot. Let me tell you what else it was and why I think that's the more interesting story. And then people are like, okay, you're not just disrespecting this thing that I instinctively think is true. You're accepting it, but you're telling me there's a bunch of other stuff. Oh, okay, so what's the other stuff? Convince me. I've just been reflecting on this book quite a lot now. I need to practice talking about it.
Now that it's birthed.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be on a maybe by the time this comes out, I will have been on a podcast about it, and so I'm going to have to practice my ability to actually communicate. One of the things that I think I heard Ryan Holiday say, it's like how it is very difficult if someone says, so you wrote this book, what's the short version? If I could have said what I wanted to say in a couple of sound bites, I wouldn't have needed to write a book. And because it would be much easier not to have written it. Yeah. You know, in part, I can't even remember everything that's in it. That's the weirdness of books. It's not like a blog article or a text that you sent or even a talk that you gave. There's so many different sorts of layers, and like maybe it's almost like music where you have little themes that are played in different keys in different ways at different times that together form this big mass. Yeah. But you can't say like do the symphony short version. I bet people have done that on YouTube actually. It's the short version of the symphony. Okay, what else is Seneca angry about? He doesn't like sophistry, which is why we've got the title. Sophistry is a weird word. It's one of those where I sort of knew what it meant but needed to remind myself a little bit. Kind of one part of it is just quibbling all the time about every little fucking detail and getting lost in that, or making kind of fallacious arguments, just basically mucking around with bits and pieces of ideas without actually doing anything, just pontificating, I guess, in some ways. I like that word. Pontificating. That's what the Pope does.
Yeah.
Such a wanky joke. I'm sorry. So Seneca thinks don't get caught up in the words and the quibbles. This is surprisingly kind of to the point for a man who lives the philosophical life, which is just like, okay, where does it actually get you? What is the purpose of what you're doing, and what's the spirit that lies behind it? Because I think sometimes you could get up in we need to define this conversation, which isn't just purely circle jerk, but maybe you're trying to define like some important rule or legal code, and it really matters what it is.
Yeah.
There's an outcome. It matters. So he says, related to this, he has an example like how closely flattery resembles friendship. It not only apes friendship, but outdoes it, passing it in the race. With wide open and indulgent ears it is welcomed and sinks to the depths of the heart, and it is pleasing precisely wherein it does harm. So he's saying essentially that there's this great phrase that Terry Pratchett used in a book, and as he put it, things that try to look like things often look more like things than things. So like the imitation is often more convincing than the real thing, because the real thing can be less dramatic and in front of you. Whereas, so in friendship here, as Seneca's giving the example, the true friend, it's more a long-term, deep, meaningful, but not everyday, crazy, remarkable experience. Whereas someone who's really trying to like tell you you're amazing is kind of stands out in your face.
That is an artifact of how our brain works. Our brain thinks and encodes information as symbols. So inevitably when we try to find meaning in the universe, in things, or remember things, we remember them by the strength and significance of the symbols we identify within a theme.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why certain pieces of art try to find the true essence of something, and then it's just like a squiggle. But and it looks really powerful and evocative, but you know, at some point you're like, was that supposed to be a cow? I can't quite tell anymore. And the real cow is such a much more complex thing. It's a being with feelings, it eats grass, it lives, and it cannot be captured by a symbol. But because our mind fetishizes and enjoys symbolification, because that's how it thinks and operates, that's why we get this effect. So where something that is designed to appear like something can be more real, because it hits the notes by which we encode that information very clearly and singularly.
I guess that's kind of how seduction works in many ways too. Let me perform the gestures and symbols that you associate with these feelings.
Yes.
Huh. And then we go, I mean, it doesn't 100% of course play out this way, but I think often the kind of relationship that you might find where it feels like a really deep personal connection with someone that doesn't just turn out to have been a facade is not the one where that shit happened, where it was,
or if it happened by accident in the right sequence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you think back of it, it's like, hey, you know, that misunderstanding led to us sort of not talking, which led to an absence, which, you know, it created this perfect seduction without anyone actually intentionally setting out to hit all the steps.
Symbols. It's we often just want to we see things as like, here's an icon for something, which is now coming ever more clear in the way that our phones work and things like that. This thing equals that thing.
Yeah.
The shorthand version that we just want to jump on. And I guess how so much advertising works, that you put a certain sort of, so you know, when products are advertised and they, maybe online ones in particular, and they want to make it look impressive, and they put like a random uncorroborated statement, but it's in like a gold star or a medal. Despite ourselves, unless you actively think through, this is clearly nonsense, part of you is like, look, it's got a medal. And that means it's good, that means it won something. Or people might put like, here's a 5-star rating under their like product or book, and you're like, from who? And it doesn't say. And you're just like, okay, it feels 5 stars is good, but what does it mean here? Nothing, potentially.
Yeah. It's all symbols, because we communicate via symbols, we store information as symbols. There was a point I wanted to make, but I've forgotten it.
Sorry, I saw you wanted to make it, but I didn't shut up.
No, that's alright.
5 stars, sitting down the
that.
medals, and that's good. Product reviews.
No, I think it's
maybe I'll come back to you. You can like.
Oh! Yes!
Hmm.
So what really gets my goal now is this loop back. So people are realizing that, and they're realizing that, you know, perception is so important to our understanding of what we think is real or not. And then they extrapolate that further into, therefore, there isn't an objective world. Like, no. No, there is an objective world. You're just experiencing it through your perceptions. Like, I was thinking about this when I was preparing a video that I ended up not shooting because I was just getting angry and I wasn't sure how to explain it properly. About, is there such a thing as time? Oh, that was one of the questions that we got. Or, is time just an illusion or something like that? It's like, no. There is clearly a physical property in the universe at a quantum level that gives a direction to existence. The fact that the way that your brain interprets the macro effects of this property in a way which is essentially meaningless doesn't mean that there isn't time. It's just that your time isn't necessarily what exists. So
when we say, like, does red exist, you're like, well, this electromagnetic wave situation that you call red does.
It does exist. And it is perceived the same way by everybody.
But your experience of red is just the story, the interpretative thing that comes through the mind. So when Buddhists say nothing exists and so on, what it means and what people often don't grasp, because it's pretty difficult to understand, is like, no, you can't walk in front of the bus and not get flattened.
Right.
But the bus doesn't exist. It is right down to like the atomic level, all of these different particles and pieces that are in this sequence, in this place, in this way, doing this thing. But it's only a bus because you look at it and go, that is a bus, and I think it is this, and it is a vehicle, and it drives, and it...
Correct.
Good, we solved it.
Done.
I think we solved the universe right there. So when you see an object, maybe it's like you're in a foreign country and you go to some interesting store or marketplace and there's some objects there that seem perhaps important. Maybe they're made of metal, silver, wood, and you don't know what it's for. So it's not a thing to you. It's just like, this is something. It seems like it's been made for a purpose, but I don't know what it is. And until they tell you, like, that's for colonic irrigation, you don't know that that's what it is. It doesn't exist for you in that way. You can see that there is a physical object, this particular coagulation of atoms. You don't know what it is. Like your mum. Anyway.
But if someone were to use it on you,
you would know.
Your colon being irrigated isn't just your perception.
But you're
an illusion of existence.
It's all an illusion, as is your colon. So what other little bits have I got here in this letter? So yes, things that try to look like things often look more like things than things. It's a good one to remember. He also says, not Pratchett but Seneca, vices creep into our hearts under the same name of virtues. Rashness lurks beneath the appellation of bravery. Moderation is called sluggishness, and the coward is regarded as prudent. There is great danger if we go astray in these matters, so stamp them with special labels. I don't know what the labels thing is meant to be, but it's a good point. Like he's making the argument that we can call things certain things, but what's the real value and intention behind them? Because you could be called a prudent person, but if really it's because you're just fucking scared, the reality is you're fucking scared.
Yeah.
And recognizing that instead of calling it, I guess, the wrong label, like, I'm just prudent. That's why I never do anything fun. And it's not that I'm scared, I'm just realistic.
Yeah. It's funny, like, well, once again, it's in the eyes of the beholder, right? That's where perception comes into it. You can... and I was rereading Machiavelli's The Prince, where he advises a prince to, wherever possible, not be generous at all, whilst retaining the appearance of being very generous. Because what's important is that people think you're very kind, not that you are actually kind, because that often leads to that downfall of a ruler, at least in those times. You don't want to squander things, or you don't want to give people too much, because then you have too little, and also they take it for granted.
Yeah.
But appearing to be generous means that people love you. And there's just such a disconnect between things that you do have to look beneath the code and be more aware of what reality is as opposed to what people call things. And then there's the fact that we start to attach emotions to certain words, which tend to follow fashions. Like the word drug is now, it means bad. Whereas back in Victorian times, it was seen as a good thing. You know, it's a funny thing.
And now things that could easily be called drugs, like caffeine, are not called drugs because they're legal and generally socially and politically accepted.
Yeah. Language is so important because of its symbolism, because of the fact that it's based on perception.
I was grumbling with a friend the other day about how a lot of people get antsy around, like if someone's like, oh, is it Mr.? And you're like, it's doctor. Like, are you a medical doctor? No. Well, it's not a real doctor. Like, I don't think that medical doctors have got a monopoly on the term doctor.
No.
They used to be called physicians, which is kind of more covering the nature of what they do.
The word doctor means well learned. Like, you know, a person who studied a lot.
Yeah, like you got to the top level of learning a thing.
Yeah.
In some way, although as this letter tells us, there is no such level, and don't think that means got to the top of the mountain and realised I knew fuck all. At least, I don't know, I can diagnose a headache because I usually have one. Just to amuse myself. So Seneca thinks playing around with language and meaning is just kind of a sideshow and it's not worth getting vexed by.
Is this where he gives us the good and necessary example?
That comes after.
Sorry.
So you can explain that bit because that confused the fuck out of me. But this bit I think I managed to decode. So before I read the quote bit, this is the point, I think. Not getting bogged down in just the endless nuance of something. And this made me think of quite a cool overview I read when I was reading about the history of the Holocaust. Always comes back to the fucking Holocaust. And Holocaust studies took off more recently than many people might expect. It's only really got super in-depth in the 80s. And I mean, that's even roughly speaking. Now it's ever more tons of stuff has been done and is being done in the past couple of decades, really. And it's sort of become a self-justifying thing that, well, it's about the Holocaust, we really need to understand. But that can mean like researching the tiniest fraction of one event in one place that is entirely exceptional. And this person said, it's kind of got to the point where we know more and more about less and less. Where you're kind of forgetting that the big picture is really what mattered.
Yeah.
And why you're interested in the first place. It's like studying the individual grain of sand back to the beach and forgetting about the beach. You're beginning to think that this grain of sand, that without it there would be no beach. You're like, it's important, it's part, but it's not enough to explain everything. So the quote from Seneca, he says, such quibbles are just as harmlessly deceptive as the juggler's cup and dice, in which it is the very trickery that pleases me. But show me how the trick is done, and I have lost my interest. And I hold the same opinion about these tricky word plays, for by what other name can one call such sophistries? Not to know them does no harm, and mastering them does no good. So my take is that he's saying it might be distracting and it might be fun to go super deep into the specifics and try and learn absolutely everything, but it doesn't really achieve very much to do so. That you could do it because it's sort of entertaining to you and interesting and do it for its own sake, but don't pretend it's hyper important. And if you finally master the field to the point where you're like, I understand every nuance of every aspect of every writer and what they've written, is it fun anymore? Is it actually fun? Or do you just get to the end and you're like, huh?
Only if it's useful in understanding new phenomena. So like in science, and going into the smallest components is extremely useful.
Yeah, I had a note say, is that true of scientific inquiry?
Because the more we understand, the more we're able to predict other things or make new scientific discoveries. Like there doesn't seem to be a limit to how long the usefulness continues when diving deeper and deeper into a knowledge silo. Like we find things that are extremely useful, like quantum mechanics sparked all sorts of interesting things, even though it's so tiny and almost like meaningless by itself. It's led to understanding of all sorts of things, and will even more so if when we start to crack things like supermagnetism, which will allow more electrical power, easier transports, all sorts of things. Even though on its own you think, why am I learning this? Why am I learning this thing that is so small that to it an atom is the size of a football field? Like, what do I need to know this? But there are repercussions, because the more you understand about the small, the more you can make inferences about all sorts of other phenomena.
You always got to remember the beach.
Yeah.
At that point, like, if your world just becomes that grain of sand, then it's completely useless. It's like designing the ultimate knife, but you've forgotten that you wanted to cut anything.
I think the difficulty with the humanities is that, for example, dissecting more and more an event into its constituents, we haven't figured out how then to rebuild the bigger picture.
It's like doing a recipe in reverse.
Yeah, you couldn't analyze the type of metal used in the fences that Trump is currently building to house the refugees, and therefore extrapolate whether or not his regime will devolve into a Nazi. It doesn't help you reconstruct new things and learn more about the future to dive that deep into a specific aspect of the past, I think.
I mean, it's funny because then people are resistant to the actual comparisons that you can make. So is it at least fascist-like to be keeping kids in cages away from their parents? Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. As a historian, I can tell you, yes, it is. But people are very resistant to when you do draw those parallels. It's one of the most... It's sort of funny but sad at the same time that you're always called alarmist if you're a historian who goes, this is quite like what happened under Stalin. And
same thing with Nazi and Jews. What I'm noticing is the ever-increasing use of medical and parasite-type language.
Uh-oh.
So language of disease. They're infecting us. It's like the words you use for things that are swarmed, like insects, ticks, and so on, and words that you use for medical infections are being used for people, and they're increasing in their use, which is always correlated with genocide eventually if it's not stopped in some way.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing to remember is it doesn't guarantee or mean that is the inevitable outcome. It just means you are creating circumstances in which it becomes possible. Yes. Because it's no longer treating people as people, it's treating them like things.
I see it as you're playing Jenga and you're taking out blocks, and you're going, careful, it's going to topple over. It's like, just because I'm taking out blocks, it doesn't mean that it's going to topple over. It's like, well, eventually, yes.
There is a structural integrity element, just there is like a moral integrity element where it starts to fall apart. I mean, it's like anti-hero stories, I guess, where they seem to be like, they're definitely on the mission, they're definitely doing the right thing, and then they cross a certain line and you're like, I don't think so. Because we cheer when the heroes cut corners and do crazy stuff that they shouldn't do, but then if they kind of lose themselves in the process, like, try not to give spoilers to Man in Black in Westworld, you're like, okay, I think you lost your way now. I think you got obsessed with the grain of sand.
Yeah.
So, blah, blah, blah. Seneca, of course, goes off on a tangent about how the only thing that you should really value is like the values that you hold. Don't think about people's possessions or how many books they've written or whatever. Who are they and what are they doing? And so forth. Are they authentic in the sense of being consistent? And don't go around being endlessly knocked off balance by new things, I guess. And if you're like, oh, I'm so ignorant, I'm an imposter, blah, 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 it's actually much better to recognize that you're always going to be a student. You're never going to feel completely in control and knowledgeable. If you do, that's a delusion.
I was reading this in the Tao Te Ching, which I've studied, that true perfection looks a lot like imperfection because it's constantly learning.
That's nice. I need to find... I've been wanting to read that a long time, and then I get stuck because there's so many translations.
I found an interesting one, at least. I'm trying out Kindle Unlimited for a month. I downloaded it So I'll show you that one. I'd actually agree with only about 50% of the stuff in there. I was getting angry at some of it. But the stuff that I do agree with is pretty interesting.
It may be that, I mean, a lot of the stuff in there, right, is intentionally ambiguous.
That part I'm more comfortable with. It's the moralistic, quasi-Christian judgments on what's good or bad that I took more umbrage with. The more black and white.
I'm not sure they're meant to read like judgments.
There's some stuff where it says, if you do this, then you're not good.
Okay. I mean, you're the one reading it, but I'm just wondering if this might be a bit of a weird translation. What if it was translated by a Christian who fucked it up? I don't know.
It was one of the later translations, and it was by a wife and husband team, of which one was Chinese. Sorry, yeah. So it was. I thought, okay,
this could be perfect.
Well, at the very least, it's not by a random British scholar that didn't grow up in the country with the language to understand the subtleties of it.
Yeah, there's a husband and wife team who do Russian to English translation who get a lot of praise. The wife is Russian, the husband is, I think he was already a writer in English, and so they work together. And then backlash from the people who live up their own assholes in Russian literature departments who are like, I can't believe how they just like miss all the nuance. So, like, obviously this should be better translated like this, and I'm like, that is so fucking ugly what you just wrote. Like this husband and wife team at least got a bit of a sense of style, a sense of flair, but yeah, I don't think Seneca would approve of that kind of like actually. So then here's the bit that you understood and I didn't, about necessity and good.
Right. So here he talks about the use of the word good. And the fact that I guess Lucilius in his letter was saying that, things that are good are things that are necessary, because there's lots of necessary things that are good. And Seneca is calling him out on that particular logical fallacy, which I forget the name of this particular logical fallacy, but I'll give you an example which will clearly illustrate. So we were talking about drag queens. And how, like, is there any straight ones? And we found out that, well, at least we haven't seen any straight ones. So let's say all drag queens are gay. The equivalent of this problem would be to then go, therefore all gays are drag queens. No. Just because one is contained by another group, doesn't that mean that that group is solely composed of that? So just because things that are good are necessary, doesn't mean that things that are necessary are good. And that's what Seneca was trying to explain.
Yeah, I don't remember what the term is for that.
And I disagree that things that are good are necessary. Like all sorts of weird, like, sexual fetishes are like, could be really good, but like they doesn't mean you have to do them.
I do. I have to. I have to do all of
them. Or I don't know. Is love necessary? I would argue that most people would argue that it is. I argue that it isn't, but it is very good.
It depends what you mean by love, of course, and we're back to the different kinds, or back to the sense that, say, you go journeying in psychedelic worlds and you come back and you're like, everything is love, and that sounds ridiculous and silly, and yet you can have the experience of essentially life energy, or the livingness of existence feels a lot like love.
But I agree. So here it's a similar argument to what Seneca is saying about the word good, that when you paint it so broadly, it can lose its meaning a little bit. And I understand the feeling behind wanting to say that, which is the same reason people think like, everything's good, it's just about your attitude, or everything's love. But then I don't think our minds can comprehend that without it being less meaningful when you do have a line in the sand, which you have to realize is probably arbitrary.
I think you need a 0 point here. I think if you're happy all the time, you've probably got a mental health issue.
Yes.
Because then where is your frame of reference, and can you ever really feel like really, really happy if you can't have the contrast of just, even not that you needed a terrible tragedy in your life, but the same way, like, appreciating being full after eating, kind of need to have been hungry.
There is a couple of diseases which make you happy all the time, genetic ones. So like, and generally they're correlated with mental retardation. So you're also not very bright. But it's quite heartwarming to see these people, because they seem to be having the best of times. The only problem is that they're super easy to swindle, and like you basically can't. You need a minder.
I guess maybe I shouldn't be judging here. it's great if they're really happy all the time. I hope people don't hurt them, but I guess you could, because they'd be happy anyway, so no harm done.
You can convince them of anything, like you can swim, like it's unfortunate because normal people can take super advantage of them without necessarily physically hurting them in a way that they would if they were normal, like even more subtle ways. You can convince them to give you all their money and things like that.
Sounds like it's not just about happiness then, it's a trustingness, or the inability to realize that there could be an ulterior or negative motive.
Which is interesting, because then you start to realize that perhaps our requirement for permanent happiness is to not have that objective understanding.
It doesn't sound good for evolution.
No, it's not, which is why it's not particularly good. Well, animals that are completely unafraid and happy get eaten.
Well, I suppose so. Richard Dawkins is at the other end of the scale, where he's suspicious of absolutely everyone who doesn't completely agree with him and hates that.
I was reading that it takes only, I think, 6 generations on a predator-less island for a particular animal to lose fear. And then it's hard to get it back, and they tend to get eaten if predators are reintroduced.
They sound delicious. So this is basically the end of the letter. It was the last quote that I quite liked, and Seneca says, "Shall you not rather transfer your efforts to making it clear to all men that the search for the superfluous means a great outlay of time, and that many have gone through life merely accumulating the instruments of life? Consider individuals, survey men in general. There is none whose life does not look forward to the morrow. What harm is there in this, you ask? Infinite harm, for such persons do not live, but are preparing to live. They postpone everything. Even if we paid strict attention, life would soon get ahead of us. But as we are now, life finds us lingering and passes us by as if it belonged to another. And though it ends on the final day, it perishes every day." So Lucilius could spend his time sitting in the library trying to read all the books until he's ready, but he's losing all the time to actually do anything with it. And he's like the person who is waiting for the perfect conditions to have a baby or go on holiday or something. There are so many people who talk about, like, oh yeah, we're going to go on that trip one day. It doesn't happen. Never happens. Because there's always an excuse and a reason. There's always something else you need to know. And I struggle with this, even though I've done quite a lot of traveling, I think, compared to some people. But there is a point, like, I get quite antsy and nervous quite close to going, because I'm like, okay, but I don't yet know how I get from the airport to the hostel, or I'm not sure if I need this paperwork for that, or when will that... And at a certain point, I just have to remind myself to be like, let go, you'll figure it out, trust that you can figure it out, because you can't control this thing, you don't know what it is going to be like, you can't foresee all the branching possibilities. Maybe you get there and the first thing that happens is that someone stabs you. I mean, it doesn't matter if you can't get to the hostel after that. Not really. Or maybe the first thing that happens is you bump into someone, you're both like, oh my god, you're incredibly hot, and you go on an amazing date or something with them, and then it doesn't matter if you get to the hostel or not. And then they stab you. So confusing. So there we go. Got to be able to flow. Got to be flexible. Don't spend all your time in a library. Believe me, it sucks.
You've actually done it. Like, I tried to avoid it at all costs, even when I was studying.
I get triggered when I get in libraries these days. Not like nice libraries, but like university libraries. Yeah. It's this sense of like quiet desperation and resentment everywhere.
Can smell it.
Yeah, I still want to have sex in the library though. Like I have only in the library bathrooms, but I feel like actually like against the stacks is something that needs to be done.
Is it gonna be like in that episode of Friends where people have sex in front of your book?
Oh, I hope so. I haven't seen that episode.
No? And he gets really angry.
Yeah, I want to... If people want to go and have sex in front of my book in any situation, please tweet that shit out. It's definitely the press that I'm looking for. This book is an aphrodisiac, even though it's about Stalin.
Well, that moustache alone.
That moustache. Oh yeah. There's sex jokes in the book. People should know about this. Pretty weird ones, but they're there. That's the end of the episode, everybody.
Come check us out on YouTube. We're multicam now.
We are multicam. So I guess you never played Unreal Tournament.
So actually, I think we should do the send-off to camera, to the wide shot. You want to do it?
Until next time, everyone, please be silly, be kind, and be weird.